and we're going to deal with housing, planning and local government. And I would greatly appreciate the generosity of any delegate charged with moving a motion who refrains from speaking and just simply moves it formally, because we've had a lot of time on housing, crucial issue, but we have to try and deal with all the other issues as well. So the movers, please, of motion number 60. Motion number 60. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry Kerr, formally moving motion number 60 in the name of Cabra and District Branch of Dublin Central. Sorry, in the name of the Central Council, my apologies. Motion number 61 in the name of the Cabra and District Branch in Dublin Central. I take your point, delegates. I take your point. I take your point. I take your point. It's a combination of the heat and the age. Motion number 52 in the name of the Donamead branch was to be moved. Formally moved. Thank you, delegate. And motion number 53 in the name of the Newport branch, similarly formally moved. Formally moved. Thank you, delegate. Yes, I take your point, Sean. Thank you. Is there a seconder for motion number 52? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. Motion number 53 now was formally moved. Is it seconded? Thank you, delegates. Formally seconded. Motion number 54, Cork South Central. Is there a mover? Formally moved. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Motion number 55 in Limerick City Constituency Council. I take it it's formally moved somewhere, is it? Formally moved, John O'Sullivan. Is it formally seconded? Thank you, delegates. Motion number 56 in the name of Galway West Constituency Council. Is it formally moved? Somebody from Galway West Constituency? Neil, is it Neil? Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. And motion number 57, Little Pace Branch, Dublin West. Is it moved? Is it seconded? Thank you, delegates. Motion number 58, Kildare South Constituency Council. Is it moved? Formally moved. Thank you, Willie. Is it seconded? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. Motion number 59 in the name of Mulhudder Branch in Dublin West. Formally moved. Mary, thank you. Is it seconded? Thank you, delegates. Motion number 60 was moved, I think. Yes, by Jerry Kerr. Is it formally seconded? Yes, thank you. Motion number 61. Declan, thank you, Declan.
Declan Mina, Cabra Branch and Area Rep. Sorry for not formally moving, but I'll get to that, and there is a reason, because this motion does move us in a different way on housing slightly. I stand before you as someone who is twice as likely to be homeless because of my disability. I stand in front of you as someone who's part of the locked-out generation that has barely any hope of even renting. Politically, for me, something Michael D said was to be the arrow, not the target. And I hope this motion is part of that. Sometimes we can get in the weeds, and sometimes we can think, none of this is possible. And sometimes we can be told by certain barristers that, no, you can't do that. And that isn't what we need. That isn't what my generation needs, and that isn't what homeless people need. We need leadership, and we need to show that something different can happen, and it can. In Paris, it is illegal to evict someone in the winter. These rent controls, I didn't think of rent controls one day in Cabra when I was bored and say, wouldn't this be a great idea? These happen in every other country, nearly. And it is absolutely clear we can have rent controls. If you look at the current rent prices, This is like someone with a bleeding arm, and the government's solution is not only to give dietary advice, but to give bad dietary advice and tell them to eat KFC while their arm's bleeding. We need a bandage, and that bandage is a rent freeze. Now, I want to be clear here. No one should have a secure home and get loads of money while causing families to be homeless. We need a rent freeze. And just so we're clear on this, if it's unconstitutional, and admittedly I'm not a barrister, I don't speak Latin, but if there's still a question whether it's constitutional or not, but if it is unconstitutional, we need to have the referendum, because it says it in the name. We're not on the side of capital, we are on the side of Labour. So I want to say this. We have to move, and we have to move now on this. We have to bring legislation that will both freeze rents and reduce it, because we've seen smoking cause cancer, so we've gone and we've regulated that. The fact is that rent increases cause homelessness, so we need to ban them. This is difficult, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but as James Larkin said, the great only seem great because we're on our knees. Let us rise.
Thank you, Declan. Now, is there a seconder for motion 61? Formally seconded. Is there a mover for motion number 62 in the name of Sean O'Casey branch in Dublin Central? Joe, you're going.
Thank you, Chairman. Joe Costello, Sean O'Casey branch, Dublin Central. I don't believe for a minute, and I don't think anybody in this hall believes, that the present government can possibly solve the chronic shortage of housing, and that we will continue to see increases in the 10,000 homeless and the 100,000 that are on waiting lists. Fine Gael, to my mind, in their political life, have never built a single social house. Because every time that Fine Gael have been in government, they've been in government with the Labour Party. In the 1990s, well, we had Fianna Fáil for a while, but it was in Stagg and Liz McManus that were building the houses. Sorry, in the 1990s. In the 1980s, Liam Kavanagh did it. In the 1970s, it was Jimmy Tully. In 4 years in government in the 1970s, Jimmy Tully built over 100,000 social and affordable housing. That is an incredible record. And what does Fine Gael do? It puts everything into the basket of the private developer. So they cannot succeed. There is absolutely no way. But what we need at the present time, and Jan has done a marvellous job in relation to the housing policy, we have a comprehensive package of proposals, but we need to be able to take it by the scruff of the neck in terms of delivery, urgently, because we need homes immediately. I believe that there is one way that we can immediately set this in action, and that is by immediately reconfiguring NAMA, the National Asset Management Agency. That is a semi-state body, remember. It was set up in 2010 to dispose of impaired assets belonging to the state. It has largely completed that job. It is at the present time building 20,000 units of accommodation. We will only get 10% of that 20,000 for social and affordable hearing. For social.
Joe, the time is up.
Sorry. So, what I am saying.
The time is up. The time is up, Joe. The time is up.
Okay.
Joe, my apologies to you. Go up and move your motion.
Wow. And I was going to vote for Jack for chairman. So the point that I'm making, there is a semi-state body already there. It has 4 billion in the bank, which can be used for housing, can be used for leverage, and of course Jan has identified a lot more funding as well. It has the expertise, it has the architects, it has the engineers, it has the staff. I think we should be immediately proposing that NAMA cease its continuing disposal of any state assets and that all the funding be directed to social and affordable housing, and that NAMA be a new semi-state body to start delivery on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I only allowed you to do that, Joe, because you had been so compliant when I asked you to stop. So, but I was wrong by asking you to stop in the first place. So, is motion number 62 seconded, please? Formally seconded. Now, motion number 63 in the name of Airfield and Edenmore Branch. Is somebody prepared to formally move it? Formally moved. Is there anybody here from Airfield and Edenmore Branch? Nobody here from Airfield and Edenmore Branch. Motion number 64 in the name of the Rathmines Branch. Is there anybody here who is prepared to... Brian, thank you. We'll call speakers in a moment. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Motion number 65 on Clare Constituency Council. Is there a mover from Clare Constituency Council? Joe, thank you. Is there a seconder? Somebody is going to formally second it. Formally seconded. Motion number 66 in the name of Ian. Why not? Kilmechanic Branch in Wicklow.
Conference, I'm not going to keep you long. I think Councillor Mary McCamley this morning spoke about motion 59, which is quite similar, and she seemed to be chair of the Kevin Humphreys Appreciation Society. And she addressed most of what I wanted to say on the matter. Just in relation to this, though, Airbnb have said publicly that home sharing didn't cause Ireland's historic housing concerns, and that also that. But what I want to say is actually that this isn't just about home sharing. This is about Airbnb taking really good quality houses out of the market and into short-term lets. Conference, if you look at websites like daft.ie, in my own hometown of Bray, there are more Airbnb houses than there are on daft.ie for rental. It is exacerbating the prices, and I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Is there a seconder for motion 66? Formally seconded. Thank you. And now motion 67 in the name of the Central Council, Mary Freehill.
Thank you, Chair and delegates, and thank you to the Central Council for agreeing this motion last week that we could take it at the conference here today. In connection with this motion, we were all certainly very disappointed that the government reneged on their commitment to agreeing a directly elected mayor for Dublin. While I support the strengthening of our democracy at local level, I invite you to look more deeply into our regional and local and regional government system in Ireland. In fact, Ireland is the most centralised country in the democratic world. Outside of Leinster House, democracy is seriously lacking, and in fact ministers for local government have even diminished powers in recent years. I'm a member of the European Committee of the Regions and work alongside members from other EU countries who have very well developed democracies at local government level. Unlike our EU neighbours, we do not have many of the competencies that they have devolved to them at local government level. Examples of this are oversight, which includes inter alia health, water, rail, energy generation, policing, education, major roads and legislation, agriculture, social welfare, public transport, cultural tourism, capital investment projects and public housing, which of course the oversight is dealt with purely at central government level. Even in areas of noise and traffic powers and estate management, we have consistently asked government to amend legislation to give us powers at local government level. They can't do it because they're too busy. So local democracy means trust and transparency. And it's important that we point out that devolved local government also means greater participation for the citizen. Even the Central European countries that joined the EU recently, that were under communist rule, went to great lengths to democratise their local government systems. So it's significant that the Scandinavian countries spend 33% of GNP at local government level. Ireland, a paltry 7.5%, and I think that tells the whole story. If there was a will, and if government is so busy, much of this could be done by giving the Senate a lead role to reform local government. And I therefore urge you, delegates, to agree this motion so that the Labour Party would be allowed to initiate and promote a process to advance genuine reform of local government powers, including asking the Senate to take the lead role in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Motion 68 in the name of Sligo Leitrim Constituency Council.
Thank you, Chair. Hugh McConville for the Sligo Constituency Council. I want to take the opportunity to highlight something. This is something now that is different from everything else, but I've taken the opportunity to allow us room to bring this up here so we can bring it up at a bigger forum. It's in relation to the National Planning Framework, the social and planning framework that's going to govern all matters between now and 2040. What I want to highlight is the imbalance of this plan. There are difficulties, serious difficulties, the way this plan affects the rest of the country, but there is nobody speaking out about the injustice that's been done to the whole west of the country. This plan lacks vision, it lacks insight, it's a total lack of imagination and a total lack of passion or belief that we can do something better. More than 1/4 of the landmass of this country is not mentioned in any meaningful way. That means most of County Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, Roscommon, most of Mayo and Cavan and large parts of Galway have no serious infrastructure planning in this plan. All of the emphasis is on from Dundalk right around to Limerick and up to Galway. This is compounding. This is an attitude to the west of Ireland that people are saying, well, you're all bananas out there and you never do anything. The reason we don't do anything is for the last 50 years we've had no investment and no infrastructure. Now, it could be the fact that the lack of quality representation that we've had in the Dáil for the last number of years is something to do with it. But that is the injustice, and me raising this and getting your support will allow the Sligo Leitrim branch to raise this issue at a local level. And if we have support of the party, that this plan should be opposed at every opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Is it seconded? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. And now in motion 69, Jack Fitzgerald Branch Dunleary.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair. This is a subject I've been going on about for a long time, even when we were in government ourselves, but we had other things on our minds then, understandably. Many people in this country are missing out on their right to vote simply because they don't know how to go about it. This may seem strange here in Ireland, where everyone seems to have an opinion about politics, some of it informed and some of it definitely not. In my own involvement in adult literacy over the years, many people have told me that they wouldn't risk going into a polling station because, as they have put it, they don't want to be shown up. I suspect this applies to a lot of other people as well all around the country, as nearly, I'm sure everyone in this room probably has come across that kind of attitude themselves while canvassing. We've had many public information films for years about smoking, drinking, road safety, gambling, and even contraception in later years, but none on the very basics of one of our most important democratic rights, not to say duties, the ability to vote. I think everyone here in this hall has had the experience over the years of thinking that, you know, everyone but us knows how things are done. I propose that a short film about our voting system from start to finish should be made to be shown on TV, cinema, online, before every election and referendum. This would start with the polling card coming in the door, what to expect when you go into your average polling station, what a typical ballot paper looks like. Just to mention in passing that it was an ex-literacy student who battled for years to get photographs of electoral candidates beside their names on the ballot, which wasn't the case before. It would take longer than I've got today to go into the vagaries of the PR voting system and the lack of knowledge about it. That's for another day. Or the confusion about wording on some referendums, like in the recent blasphemy referendum, I think. As we can see from the recent presidential election, turnout is often not as high as it should be in our system. It may not be just because of indifference. All political parties are missing out at the moment because they're not doing all they can to make sure everyone can play their part in exercising their democracy as much as they would wish to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Is there a seconder for motion number 69? Formally seconded. Thank you, Delegates. Now we're at composite number 2, which is to be proposed by Carrick-on-Shore branch.
Hello, my name is Sarah Dunn from the Carrick-on-Shore branch. In 2014, one of the biggest travesties that have happened in Irish politics was getting rid of the town councils. For a Labour Party, who was built on town councils and local government, to not oppose that is, in my opinion, a disgrace. We need to continue to work to bring back town councils. In the last conference that we had in Wexford, we voted in favour of bringing town councils back to urban areas of more than 5,000 people. And this is something that we need to continue to do. We've seen it 5 years ago. Our numbers on a local level were absolutely decimated. Yes, in part to the unfavourable things that we were doing in government, and also in part to the fact that we don't have that local level. I encourage every one of our candidates going to the doors to say to their local constituents, we are the party that will bring a voice back to you. We need to bring a voice back to the people of Ireland, and this is a priority. I thank Senator Nash for the work that he has done in bringing forward a bill to our private members' meeting, and I hope that you will support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And I understand it's being formally seconded by Bray Connolly. Yes? Yes, thank you, delegates. So now we're at motion number 71 in the name of the Central Council. Is there a mover? Is somebody prepared to formally move it? Formally moved. Thank you, delegates. Delegate. And is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Thank you. Motion number 72 in the name of Dublin Central Constituency Council. Marie.
Marie Sherlock, Cabron District, moving motion number 72 on behalf of Dublin Central Constituency Council. Colleagues, comrades, friends, we've had a number of motions today, really good motions this morning and this afternoon on the issue of the housing crisis. And as we all know, no single measure will resolve the housing crisis. But a series of measures can and will have a real impact if the political will is there. I want to move motion 72. It focuses on just one specific issue, and that relates to the powers of local authorities with regards to derelict sites, acquiring derelict sites, and the power to incentivise the use of vacant sites. If we look at the various data sources, there's anything between 90 and 180,000 vacant properties across this country. I know in my own constituency where I'm active and a member of Dublin Central, there are hundreds of properties, derelict properties that are a blight on the local community and deprive families of a viable housing option. We know in many local authorities across the country that the elephant in the room is the constitutional right to property, or the constitutional rights around property. And whether the chill effect is perceived or real, it's hard to interpret, but certainly it has deterred local authorities from taking action. I want to applaud the work of the Labour councillors in Dublin City Council and in Louth County Council for actually taking aggressive measures to take in charge derelict sites in their local authorities over the past number of years, but local authorities in other areas simply are not. So we need to do more. We need stronger legislation, and in particular, we need to shorten the time with which properties can be taken in charge, and secondly, reduce the cost. Delegates, I ask you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Is it formally seconded? Thank you, delegates. Motion number 72. Sorry, motion number 73 now, in the name of the Greystones branch, Eileen.
Sorry, Jack, but it's the only one on water. I'll try and be quick. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, this motion is about the sovereignty of Irish water. That is, that Irish water remains solely in the ownership of the state as a public entity, utility. Of all the utilities available in this country, water is essential to life. Therefore, it needs to be protected from private ownership at all costs. The privatisation of water services in England and Wales has brought high financing costs and high costs to consumers. We do not want to see Irish people without water, especially given the recent European Parliament vote to cut off water for non-payment. Irish Water was incorporated in July 13. Under the Water Services Act, it brought water and wastewater of the 31 local authorities together under one national service provider. Irish Water is a subsidiary of Ervia, not sure of the pronunciation, formerly Bord Gas, and is currently a semi-state body. The mismanagement of the setting up of Irish Water caused much fear and anger over water charges throughout the country, and with it brought fears of privatisation. Fine Gael present as being in favour of privatisation generally, and so the call for a referendum on retaining public ownership of water emerged. In 2016, the Water and Public Ownership Bill was presented to the Dáil. It had party support, including Fianna Fáil, and Fine Gael decided not to oppose it but to send it through committees. They argued that such an enactment in the Constitution could cause a lot of unforeseen difficulties, especially with group water schemes, etc. To date, no referendum has been set. Recently, our own Jan O'Connell raised the question as to why it was delayed. By 2023, it is planned that Irish Water will separate from Ervia to become an independent company. It is also planned that it will disassociate from the local authorities. This plan has increased the concern that on one hand it could be more easily privatised, or on the other that it could be more easily nationalised through referendum. Whatever the outcome, it's imperative that Irish Water remains in public ownership. It is preferable to do this through referendum, as then it can only be changed by the people of this country and not by a political party that leaves people homeless and insisting on sticking to an ideological capitalist belief. In December 14, Junior Minister Fergus O'Dowd warned that there were forces at work to privatise Irish water, and rumours abound about a certain Irish capitalist waiting in the wings to buy it. The 2004 Water Services Act had built in some protections against the privatisation of Irish water, but it is only legislation, and legislation can be changed by a majority in the Dáil. Therefore, we in Labour require a strong written policy that we are in favour of a referendum on the public ownership of water. I commend this motion to conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Is the motion formally seconded? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. Now, all of these motions All of these motions are before the floor for debate. Peter. I was going to say I hope that nobody wants to speak, but anyway.
Apologies, Chair. Peter Horgan, Blackrock, Mahon Branch, candidate in South East Ward. I wish to speak on motion 67 that looked to restore powers to local government. I urge support of the motion, but with a slight hint of caution. There's no point divesting powers to an unelected executive unless we're prepared to divest real powers to elected representatives at local level. We have seen in Cork City recently a spend of €300,000 of taxpayers' money on a brand and a hashtag that tells Cork people they're from Cork. And I'm a proud Cork man. I know I'm from Cork. I don't need to be told I'm from Cork. And the big problem on that aspect was not one elected member of City Hall or County Hall was informed before this money was spent. This isn't an attack on the other parties, regardless of their standing in the political spectrum. This is a criticism of an unelected executive that is riding roughshod with public money throughout the country, and it has to stop. And I would say to the Senate, if the Seanad is the body to deal with this, it must do so quickly and decisively, and not sitting on its laurels like it has with its own reform for the last number of years. We need action if we are to have a real results that bring real democracy to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, look, sorry, delegates. I mean, we can continue it on, but it means that we're not going to deal with anything else at this conference. But if you want to speak, I have to let you speak. Go ahead, John.
I'll be very brief, Chairman. Johnny Walsh, Roscommon, Galway, member of the Central Council. I just want to speak in favour of the composite motion in relation to the restoration of town councils. I do, however, have a slight reservation about the wording of the last paragraph relating to the town councils being brought back for the 2024 local elections. The reason I have a problem with that is that I feel it might give licence to our party to feel they can put this on the back burner. We don't need it on the back burner. This is very, very urgent. We've already put it on the back burner already. This has been party policy for 4 years. For the first 2 years, to be fair, we did nothing. But I do want to acknowledge, for the last 2 years, a lot of work has gone in on the legal side, and Brendan Howland has introduced the bill some 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it's now at committee stage. So I want to recognise that. But I think we all realise that our town councils won't be back by May of next year. That's too big an ask. However, that doesn't mean we can take our eye off the ball. I think we have to keep motoring to ensure we get this through the Oireachtas. And I'd be looking for an assurance from our party spokesperson and indeed our party leader that no stone will be left unturned in the short term, and I mean the short term, and to deal with the other parties' independence and indeed the government to get this over the line ASAP. Thank you very much, comrades.
Sorry, Chairman. Jeremy Holt, English Beagle. It's just a point on motion 61. You talk about improved squatters' rights by reducing the period of occupation from 12 to 5 years. This might be all right in the urban situation, but there's an awful lot of ramifications as far as farmland or rural property goes. I just want to make that point. You can work the rest out yourself.
Sorry, Mick, have we a mic for Mick, Brian?
I just want to comment on what Declan said about being a person with disability be more likely to be homeless, and that is a possibility. You know, people with disability want to live independent lives. One thing I will like to Dermot Lacey, Dublin City Council, the last lot of social housing he brought out, I think it was 7 houses of that were for people with disability. So in the rush to get housing done, I would ask people not to forget about people with disability, their needs and what they need. Secondly, I'm sorry about this, Chair, for the rush to build houses and whatnot, we've got to remember that the infrastructure has to go in. Schools, shops, doctor surgeries and whatnot. So let's not forget that. That's very important. And then on motion number 69, I totally agree with. Labour Disability are always fighting to make things done in easy English. We have about 25% of our population have a reading age of 12. So it's important that we want to get a message across. We have to do it in easy English. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time on these motions, particularly on local government, because I believe they are the most important motions we're discussing this weekend. Not alone was the putting people first, abolition of town councils, the single worst decision that was made. It was a decision which was politically targeted at the Labour Party and at the power base of our party in towns and cities throughout Ireland. It is imperative for our party that the most important and fundamental level of local democracy is re-established. It is not a coincidence that we are the only country in the European Union which has abolished town government level, and it was simply, purely and simply a Fine Gael ideological drive to take democracy away from people and to damage our party in particular and to damage social democracy and the left in Ireland. And I'm just going to say one thing, Chair. This evening, the party leader intends setting out for us the strategies that will happen at the next general election. I want to hear that the re-establishment of town councils is a red line issue for this party, that we will not enter into any government arrangement without it being simply signed up for. If we don't get town councils back, as far as I'm concerned, and I think most of our members, we should not be in any arrangement. Gramagat.
Good afternoon, Catherine Clancy, Cork North Central. I just want to support the motion from Dublin Central Constituency Council, Maria Sherlock's motion, just to say on the acquisition and the acquiring of derelict sites that, you know, after many, many years, Cork City Council have slowly started to move on acquiring derelict sites. But I do think that the acquiring of derelict sites is welcome, but that the actual process is flawed insofar as that, you know, they're acquired by a tender process, so the property goes to the highest bidder and nobody knows who's going to acquire those properties. I think if anybody is to acquire those properties, particularly in residential areas, that the residents have suffered these properties for long enough, and if anybody is to acquire these properties, it needs to come with an application on a plan on that property as to how it will be developed and a time frame on when that development will start and when it will finish, because a lot of these properties are actually sold off quite cheaply, and what we have is going from one speculator to a second speculator. So I think it's essential that they come with a time frame on completion for Gurmina Hagan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Liam van der Speck, Cavan Branch and local election candidate for Cavan Bell Turbot. I just want to appreciate the comments from previous speakers on town councils, because especially areas like Cavan that have been very well served by Labour town councillors and have no other representation now have nothing. So I think people like Des Cullen, who've been amazing mayors in Cavan, you know, it's a real loss to the town, and not to have it, especially now as well, with housing, derelict housing are all around the town. It really does show. But the main point I just wanted to make, someone said earlier about that we don't talk about enough as a society about ideology. And I think that's really true in this issue. And I think Fine Gael absolutely have shown their colours. Owen Murphy and Leo Varadkar don't care. You know, we hear Leo Varadkar earlier on the radio today, and he was confronted with the realities of the difficulties in getting accommodation for young families and students. And he's saying, oh, well, it's always been hard. You know, for someone who talks about an Ireland of opportunity, I certainly hope the next generation of entrepreneurs are more ambitious than that. You know, it's ridiculous. And he'd have the audacity to criticise proposals from the Labour Party, constructive proposals like we've had here on motions, or from John O'Sullivan, as though there's some crazy nonsense like the rent controls. And they'll do it in this. And meanwhile, they will propose things like incentives for first-time buyers schemes, which only add to the problem because they increase demand when it's a supply-side issue. So they're economically illiterate and still come after us. And what is the point in a housing market that doesn't provide housing, a decent quality housing that people can afford? The same way they go after minimum wage. You know, if you have minimum wage, you increase it, we lose jobs. What's the point in those jobs if they're jobs that don't give people a wage that people can have a decent living on? There's no purpose. And it has no infection of left-wing thinking, the current neoliberal status that we have, as a result entirely of their ideology. So, and as well, all they'll provide is incentives to developers, incentives to landlords, because that's their base, that's what they care about. They don't care about you. And the PDs and the Fianna Fáil over the decades, that mindset has just completely corrupted our housing market. It wasn't left-wing thinking that resulted in this substantial housing crash of 2008. So for anybody to be coming along and lecturing the left on how you do housing, well, I think you can certainly take a seat.
That's it.
Thanks very much.
GAV comrades, Max Kelly, Galway West. Very briefly on Proposal 56, which is to reform the Tenancies Act. This is really important. I see that the tagline as I drove into Dublin today, the new republic. The current republic is that a third of households are rented households in this country. We are going out canvassing the local elections next May, I think. 1 in 3 households who are knocking on doors are going to be rented houses. We need our elected representatives, and we need to put pressure on the Labour Party to reform the Private Tenancies Act so there is security of tenure for rented households. Michael Davitt, the Land League, is 3 centuries ago now, and we don't have it. I think this is something the Labour Party should be advocating. When my friends say to me, Max, why should I vote for Labour? This is something that we can be saying on the doorsteps. I put it to conference. Thank you.
Hi, Ger Mills, Athlone, Longford constituency. I didn't intend to speak, but I feel I have to because I've sat here all day listening about housing. In particular, number 61, a mandatory 4% rent reduction per year for the following 2 years. I want tenants to be able to stay in the houses that they've been in for the last 10, 11 years. We have 70,000 small landlords in this country, according to statistics. Each of them own 1 or 2 houses, so they've inherited it from their mum. They bought it when they were young and then had to move down the country for whatever reason. And now they're being lumped in time and time again with the vulture funds who buy hundreds of houses, who up the rent. Small landlords are keeping with the 4%, to my knowledge. They're working with their tenants to keep families in houses for decades because people can't move on now, so they have to stay. And I would just recommend that we sort of separate vulture landlords who aren't playing by the rules and smaller people. We want to keep people in houses, but more and more small landlords are having to get out because they're the ones going to work in the morning for smaller wages than they had in the boom. They're the ones trying to pay a mortgage of their own or still paying on the rented property. Landlord is not a 4-letter word. Everybody is not good or bad. There's differences, and I think we need to consider what the differences are. Thank you very much.
Now I want to call on the, John O'Sullivan, party spokesperson on housing, to respond to the debate. John O'Sullivan.
Thanks, Chair, and I will keep it brief. I know we have very important motions coming up. I'd just like to thank all of those who have proposed motions both this morning and this afternoon. I've had an opportunity to speak quite a bit this morning, so I particularly want to just refer to the more recent motions that were proposed this afternoon and to say that I fully accept there were many of them around issues like strengthening local democracy and the town councils, around balanced regional development from Sligo Leitrim, around voting, which I think is really important, the Jack Fitzgerald's branch motion around people actually being able to vote because they're given the information that they need. The referendum on water, absolutely essential. And issues around the stick rather than just a carrot in relation to derelict sites, etc. Now, I suppose I particularly then would just like to focus on two in particular of the other motions that were spoken about this afternoon, one being the one that Joe Costello proposed about NAMA. I don't know if any of you have had time to read the papers today, but NAMA are still paying developers up to $195,000 per year. So we absolutely need to reconstitute NAMA's purpose, and we propose that under our proposals in the National Housing Development Bank. We need to make NAMA a servant of the people. It was there to do things with the economy. We now need it to focus on housing. I also want to just refer to the last speaker and indeed to Declan's motion number 61. I realise there are issues around small landlords, and I think we need to look at those, and the specific issues around smaller landlords. But I don't want to reject the motion overall. There's a great deal of content in that motion, and if we are passing a motion on housing emergency, then in an emergency there's a lot of things you can do that you can't do, and I know there are constitutional issues here. There are a lot of things you can do in an emergency. Back when the banks needed to be bailed out, and we voted against the bailout, the government of the time did a lot of things to save the banks that we might have been told previously we couldn't do. We now need to save our people from homelessness. The theme of our conference is a new republic. We currently live in a republic of homelessness. We want to live in a republic of homes. That is what the Labour Party is about. So again, I would commend the motions to the members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. So now we're going to vote on all these motions. All in favour of motion number 52. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 53. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 54. Is it agreed? Agreed. If you're against, shout. Motion number 55. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 56. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 57. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 58. Agreed? Agreed. Motion 59. Is agreed? Agreed. Motion number 60. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion 61. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion 62. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 63 was not moved, so falls. Motion number 64. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 65. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 66. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 67. Is it agreed? Agreed. Motion number 68. Agreed? Agreed. Motion 69. Agreed? Agreed. The composite number 2 is agreed? Agreed, I think. Motion number 71 is agreed? Agreed. Motion 72 is agreed? Agreed. Motion 73 is agreed? Agreed. And now, thank you.